Vishnu started his career in sales while going into school. So he graduated from one of the top universities in the United States, put himself through school, worked as an account executive, then had to make a decision. He's got a great degree, great background, great story. Does he want to go into kind of a company that's already well established? Or does he choose to go into a Series A startup and be one of the first employees to report in to the team there and to go in and start something from nothing? Okay, Vishnu, my man, I appreciate you taking the time. For those that don't know Vishnu, let me give you a brief introduction to him. So Vishnu started his career in sales while going into school. So he graduated from one of the top universities in the United States, put himself through school, worked as an account executive, then had to make a decision. He's got a great degree, great background, great story. Does he want to go into kind of a company that's already well established? Or does he choose to go into a Series A startup and be one of the first employees to report in to the team there and to go in and start something from nothing? Based on his experience, where he then chose to go take that jump, went into Athelis, a head of sales there, and now part of a company worth over $7 billion. So Vishnu, really appreciate you taking the time. And I know that our audience is going to be thrilled with what they learn from you.
No, I appreciate the time as well, Dan. It's an honor to be here, and I'm sure there's a lot of exciting stuff that I can share, and a lot of insight that a lot of these listeners can hear about and hopefully apply into their own experience and their journey into sales and any career path really that they're diving into. So looking forward to the chat.
100%. So first thing that I want to talk about, one of the things that we find that's pretty common with the few people that decide to take the risk, go work for an early stage startup and succeed, is their work ethic. And your story kind of starts from a really young age. I'd like to just talk about what taught you throughout your life, whether was it when you were young, did you learn it in college, that work ethic applied with the intelligence that you have is going to get you places. When did that kind of come into mind for you? When did you start noticing that work ethic was something that was core to who you were?
Yeah, it's a good question. It honestly traces back to the really, really early days. I think when I was, back in school, even as far as I can remember, probably around middle school, a little bit into high school. Something that I always struggled with was the ability to focus, whether that was in class, whether that was on a test, whether that was even in a conversation. And I came to the realization that I feel like it's tougher to focus, or it's tougher to be able to sit down and kind of stay in one place and really lock in on something compared to the average person. And I was blaming it on 101 things and saying, hey, it's because of this, it's because of that. But ultimately, I think what that led me to is coming to the realization that, shoot, I might have to be, able to work a little bit harder and spend a little bit more time than the person on my left or the person on my right. So I think having that disadvantage of me maybe not able to, read a paragraph and pick it up as quickly as somebody else, or listen to a conversation and have them repeat it, kind of made me, in a position where I need to be 100% locked in and put 2x effort into everything that I'm doing. And that's obviously from a micro perspective. And then now you're looking at a career path and you're looking at long-term goals, long-term opportunities. And I said, hey, if I apply, the same kind of work ethic that I would try to do in class or in academics or even towards internships or jobs, I was always a believer that to some extent, work ethic can trump talent. I don't think it's the case in every single situation, but I think there's a lot of value in somebody who can work really hard and put in, a ridiculous amount of effort. Because I think, effort is harder to coach than, somebody who's just got a natural skill set or somebody who doesn't. So, I think there's a lot of value in understanding where you're currently at when it comes to just, a daily task, a long-term goal, a short-term goal. How long is it really taking you to achieve the outcomes or the goals that you're setting for yourself? And basically work backwards from there. And if you're finding yourself, putting in the work and it's not, you're not realizing those goals, you're not realizing those, aspirations as quickly as you want, you sort of build like a formula for yourself that is really unique to only you, and really nobody else. And I think that can set you pretty far. So I know that's a kind of 1,000-foot description, but I feel like the concept of me realizing that, hey, I might have to work a little bit harder than everybody else around me due to XYZ reasons kind of naturally made me motivated to be able to work that extra 2x of strength. And then I think coupling that with finding your passion also just I think subconsciously drives a natural work ethic. And I think that's a whole different type of work ethic that we'll probably chat about a little bit later in this conversation. Because I think there's two aspects to a work ethic. It's something that you're forcing yourself to do. Maybe you don't like it, maybe you're not used to it, but you're finding yourself constantly, working harder, spending more time on it, getting creative with, your organization around it. And then there's things that just come very naturally to you. And I feel like if you connect with a goal, you connect with an idea, a job, a internship, whatever that may be, and you find yourself naturally motivated to have a strong work ethic without you really even trying to, I think you've struck gold in a way, and you can go really far with that.
Yeah, so I'm going to summarize what you're saying. Tell me if this is oversimplified or kind of spot on with what you're saying. First off, you were incredibly introspective. At a young age, you were recognizing some of this stuff that you wanted to excel at wasn't just coming naturally. And
Mhm.
as such, me, Vishnu, I'm going to go work harder to go in and get that because this matters to me. But you chose to think about that. And so,
Mhm.
and then you go and later on say, if in life you're finding you're working really hard, you're not getting what you want, again, be introspective. Think about that. What is
Mhm.
that secret sauce for you that can go in and lead to success? So is
Yeah.
introspection kind of a core part to who you are as well?
Yeah, it is. And it's funny because I don't think it was something that I always like, innately had. I felt like that was something that I was just finding myself doing because maybe I was not where I'd want to be, or I was right behind the top performer, or right behind somebody else that I really aspired to be. So I think that naturally motivated me to think of like, hey, what am I doing differently? Why am I not where, I want to be? Whether that's literally like a test on an exam or, a job that I didn't get in college, whatever it may be. I think that competitive edge also forced me to be a little bit more introspective, and help me understand a little bit of, areas that I can kind of improve on and work towards. And I think that kind of engineered a pretty strong work ethic earlier on in my, education, and also just translating that into work too. But yeah, I think introspection is a big theme for sure.
I don't know if you know this, but you're actually quoting a lot without quoting the stats from two books, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell and Peak the Science, or sorry, the Science of Expertise by Anders Ericsson. That essentially, if you'll choose, I want to go be an expert in something, you get introspective about yourself. Malcolm Gladwell says it takes about 10,000 hours. Anders Ericsson says the amount of hours varies wildly depending on the industry, your mentors, and the types of practice that you do. But
Hmm.
both of them, it takes that work ethic that you're talking about. And it
Hmm.
takes, in your case, Peak really talks a lot about what you're talking about, the introspection to say, are you assessing where you're great, where you're not, and achieving your goals and what you're going to go do about it? But anyway, I don't know if you knew you were quoting those books with knowingly or without knowing it. But I want to jump into the next thing is give me an example. When was the first time career wise? It could be one of those first early jobs. It could be an internship. It could be while you were working in the capital world. Prior to Athelis, when was a time where your work ethic, because you chose to go all in on that, paid off?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's one clear answer that I've talked to a lot of people about, regardless of if they've asked me or not. And I think it traces back to sophomore year summer, in college, where I decided to go and do door-to-door sales for 4 months. So this was, I'd say, the most official sales, job that I had at the time. Granted, I was still maybe like 19 or so. So still had 2 years left to college. Was obviously excited to work, but couldn't take on, a full-time sales role. And, I was a hungry kid. I wanted to make a lot of money. I wanted to, test again, like my work ethic and see what I could do with the direct, relationship of saying, hey, if I work harder, then, maybe I can make some money this summer. Right. And it was a tough decision. I had to sacrifice some trips, a lot of hangouts, a lot of, family time and stuff. But I said, hey, this
Yeah.
could be really like an aha moment for me. If I have success in this, and not only that, but if I enjoy it, which is kind of a funny thing to say. Like, I don't know if too many people really like go into door sales, like passionate about like saying, I just want to be out there in neighborhoods, knocking doors in 90-degree heat. Like, I don't know if people are going for that. If you are, then awesome. Kudos to you. I'm sure you're successful, but that's not something that I like truly aspired to. But I did know that it was, again, going back to the work ethic, that it would be the ultimate most raw form of, I think, entering a sales career. So for me, diving into that, specific job for 3 4 months, was truly probably one of the most, I think, developing experiences I've had as a salesperson. Again, like I had pretty much zero sales experience into before going into that role. I understood like the grittiness and the amount of hard work that's required to go into it. But when you're actually in that, you know, neighborhood on a day-to-day basis, pounding pavement
Yeah.
7 days a week. And I was just in Sacramento where it was, probably 95, 100 degrees, in heat, and we're knocking doors with hills and all types of obstacles along the way. It felt more physical than mental. But the minute you start to realize that, hey, I'm actually pretty decent at this and I'm starting to have fun with it, you can go really, really, really far. So I think I just like the idea of putting yourself in a position which is the toughest way to start so that everything after that is, I don't want to say easier, but you can look at it from a different lens and say, hey, I'm still sitting at my desk. I might have 6 client meetings right now on Zoom, or I might have 5 internal meetings that I'm trying to get my team, overcoming, missing quota the previous quarter, whatever it may be. And you can look back to those days and be like, hey, nothing would be like grittier than kind of, the physical wear and tear of doing that. And also just the mental kind of fortitude that it takes to be able to like do that on weekends and consistently take the rejection and go into people's homes that are relaxing perfectly on a Sunday. I mean, this is so different than a cold call, right? And it's definitely a
Yeah.
learning curve that you have to get pretty adjusted to. And I knew it was going to be the most ultimate form of rejection as well, too. So, you know, moral of the story is I had a feeling that it was going to be a very real and very raw experience into sales. And, I did have a lot of success in that. They actually ended up trying to get me to sort of manage an office with them and build a team out of, 4 or 5 folks. But I thought that was just more of like an experimental thing that I wanted to kind of test where I can be and where I might end up. And had success with it, felt great, and definitely a big confidence booster, after exiting that job. And I think that just leveled up the game a little bit more. And I was hungry as heck right after, that job, ready to graduate and kind of ready to kind of, you know, put this into the real world.
I got a question for you. So a lot of people in sales in particular, they either try to pretend it's not important or maybe it actually isn't important for them. For myself, when I chose sales, there were kind of three things that motivate me in sales. One, money. Two, the opportunity to be with the team I really, really love. And three, an intellectual challenge. For you, when you're early on, and you could go do anything because you're super smart. You could have got an internship at Google. You could have got an internship at any kind of the FANG companies if you wanted. What motivated you to say, I'm going to do my internships, my summers, and then my first job in sales?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think balancing school and jobs is just always difficult for everybody. And I had a lot of fun, during the semesters, during the academic years. And I was at a point where I'm like, hey, I can sacrifice something. And, I always actually never really looked at it. Now I think back and say like, hey, this is a big sacrifice, which is funny. In college, you would think it was the opposite. But I think I was just felt incredibly motivated to just experiment with a real life job. Considering the fact that, people go to school for 18, 22 years, like that's a really long time in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think there are folks that can, go out into the real world a lot earlier. And that's why you see so many people in today's day and age in the economy and in the Bay Area, specifically where I'm from, that are dropping out of colleges left and right. I mean, it's becoming more normal than abnormal. And I'm not saying that I was willing to drop out and go chase a job, but I always did have that mindset that the stuff I'm learning right now is definitely going to translate into the real world, but I'm ready to kind of put those skills to use and see what I can actually achieve. So going to your question, I think some of the things that really motivated me was, I mean, of course, like, money's a big aspect. I think the biggest thing that really helped me, secure my decision and really want to be, full force into sales was having full autonomy over my outcome. I think there's a lot of jobs and a lot of
Okay.
positions out there that you can work as hard as you want. You can even have the output that, management is expecting out of you. You can have the results, you can have everything, but promotions can still be, blocked off. You can still reach a brick wall.
Yeah.
A lot of jobs, it's not going to make a difference in your paycheck, no matter how many hours you're putting in. And then ultimately, those two things sometimes can cap your personal development. So sales is a very simple, formula. In most companies, I say if you hit your quota and you do really well, there's so much opportunity ahead, right? So, I thought, okay, hey, if I can narrow down my focus towards the most, uniform aspect of the job is just getting towards your quota, and working with people that, I think are all on that same level of motivation, I think you can really, have a lot of opportunity to be able to not just make a lot of money, but to also build a kind of a path for your own career, whether that's moving into leadership, whether that's moving up market, whether that's moving laterally into a different department. I just thought that it's very black and white in sales, and I like that. There's a lot of variables, but I feel like a lot of those variables are under your control compared to other positions.
That's kind of a thought for all the listeners that go and read this, whether you're a founder getting ready to start your go-to-market team, or whether you're an individual thinking about going into sales. Those two things are unique in sales. Money being in your control, your career and promotions being in your control. So founders, you need to design your comp plans with the Vishnus in mind, because if you don't, if you design a comp plan that caps people out, limits them, doesn't promote based on performance, you lose your best. And individuals, you need to go find companies, and choosing sales allows you, if you're going to go put 60 hours a week, working your tail off, learning the whole way, don't just put the hours, but actually be learning along the way so that you're getting better, you've got the opportunity to go soar. So, Christian, the next question I want to jump into is, so now your school's done. You've got all these opportunities that you can go in and look at. Tell us a little bit about why a Series A company. I've got to get to know you guys at Athellis a lot over the last 3 years. I've got to get to know you, but I don't know this answer on you. Why Athellis Series A way before they were the hottest thing out there? Why did you take that risk? Tell us about that and kind of what was going on the inside of you as you made that decision.
Yeah, yeah. So it traces back to a couple things. I definitely, again, it goes back to the autonomy. And I wanted to go one layer deeper. So like we talked about in sales, you have autonomy over your income to some extent. You have autonomy over your development, your growth. But when you're joining a startup, I think you have an opportunity to branch a little bit more outside of just the sales world. And me specifically wanting to choose a startup directly correlated to my interest in developing outside of sales as well. Because I know that in a startup, you're going to guarantee be wearing multiple different hats. And I think there's a lot of value in gaining those skills in a quicker amount of time, right? Because startups move fast. So I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but even I'll come back to this as well and kind of tie this back to how Athellis came into the picture and really what's the story there. So, I finished up college, obviously, and this was down in Southern California. 6 months after college, I was actually working at another company, very different from Athellis, and it was an internship that I did in senior year that they offered me a full-time gig. And I think as an intern in college in senior year, when you get an offer with a company that you already know, there's again that sense of comfortability. It's like, hey, I've known this. Like they're offering me a full-time, they believe in it. It's not that first-time gamble. So I think I got a little comfortable with that and took that opportunity and started to realize that you reach a ceiling pretty early on at larger companies. And I wanted to kind of branch out and also check out what's really happening in the Bay Area. So I was aware that not living in the Bay Area for a while, I felt kind of disconnected from that high-paced environment and the amount of action I think that's happening. Because when you move out of the Bay Area, and you are in the Bay Area for a little bit, you kind of relate that environment to the Bay Area every single time. And, I obviously have a personal bias there just growing up and everything. So I did a lot of hunting to kind of understand what are the companies really that are not even just early on, but I dug into my own network. So my brother is, a founder at his own company. He has been for about 5-7 years or so. And he had some connections actually directly to Athellis and some of the executives there. And he actually gave me a call one day and said, hey, I've heard about some of the frustrations in your job and some of the things that you want to do. Would you be willing to try this company out and relocate? And, I spent a couple of days kind of reading into it, researching it. And this was not just me taking another job. This would be, shifting my entire sort of life after spending 7 years in Orange County, moving back to kind of the Bay Area. And, I was like, hey, huge risk. And I was like, I'm pretty young. And the biggest thing I think for absolutely without a doubt, and I think for all the listeners out there too, is take full advantage of your youth. Like, do not over question the opportunities that you have ahead of you when you are young, specifically. That applies, I think, throughout your life. But I think when you are young, you should be relentlessly risky. I think there's so much value in that. So that's something that I think motivated me, knowing that if I don't take this and something happens later on, I am going to live with so much regret. And it's not like if I didn't take it, like I'd be an unhappy person. I'd be in a different spot. I'm sure I'd be successful in different areas, but it was just like a too golden of an opportunity with the stage of where I was at to pass up on, right? So, you know, again, making that decision to kind of, choose this company, I think also happened because, again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, the opportunity to kind of grow into like a full cycle salesperson and also understand what it takes to not just be a successful IC, but also grow into a company that is developing a sales motion, that is taking a product completely, out of thin air into a go-to-market motion. And Athellis was doing something that literally no other company was doing. And I know everybody kind of says that about their product, but this was literally a device that no one in the world had, right? So that was also a huge kind of edge that motivated me to be like, okay, I could really go and pioneer something, pretty well here. Did a lot of more research into this, and the way Athellis moved in the interview process was also just so incredibly inspiring for me because I had a call with Deepika, one of the co-founders. And the next night, I had another interview with Tanae, and both of these calls, by the way, were at 10 p.m., which is also
Yeah.
like, okay, I see what we're doing here. And I think by the end of the week, I booked a plane ticket, started packing, and I found an apartment and moved out there.
I can't emphasize that enough. Choosing as founders and hiring managers to prioritize the incredible people like Vishnu out there, where you go and you interview, you don't wait 2 weeks between interviews, you don't wait a week.
Yeah.
You're making the next interview happen the next day. And if that's at 10 o'clock at night, I think that's a core reason why Athellis, now Commures, had so much success. Vishnu, talk a little bit about what advice to all the future founders out there would you give when they're a Series A and they're hiring their first sales team? What are things that they need to know? Do this right in your first 2 years of launching go to market, and you're better off, or avoid these things and you're better off. What lessons of kind of wisdom can you go and impart to founders?
Yeah. I think one thing that might be fairly contradictory that I'm just going to throw out here anyways is I think there's a lot of value in targeting folks with minimal experience. And I know that's kind of a crazy thing to say, but me, for example, and other folks that I've seen at Athellis have been some of the most successful people at this company with very minimal experience. And I think Athellis specifically did a good job at understanding how to mold experience within their employees. Because I think when you're bringing on different folks from different teams with different backgrounds, there's tons of value with experience. And I'm not saying don't go out and seek folks with industry experience or professional experience at all. Like that's obviously invaluable, but I think there's also
Yeah.
a lot of value in folks that don't have a big history of various jobs or various experiences within their own space, because they tend to come in significantly more open-minded, and there's less friction in ramping that person up because the main thing that they're familiar with and that they know is just that company that they've started with, right? And this is obviously tied to specific positions. There's multiple positions where you're going to need folks that have been out there and have a track record that's valuable. But there are certain positions that I think you should be very open-minded to experimenting with, because those are some of the people that I think will bring some of the most value outside of just previous tenure in XYZ companies. And then specifically with the go-to-market motion, I think there's a lot of value in understanding, honestly, not even just like the competitors out there, but the speed that you move at is the most critical thing, that I think that's valuable when it comes to a go-to-market motion. I think there are so many things that Athellis does poorly, and the difference that I think we do, and the thing that a piece of advice that I do is identify those things that you're doing poorly as quickly as possible. That is like the difference that I think we've made strong impacts on, is make those mistakes, but make them as quickly as possible so you can iterate and push, the new version, push the next thing out there as possible, as quickly as possible. Because I think there's a lot of founders, there's a lot of folks out there that are afraid to, do a soft launch, do a hard launch, ship these new features, scale the team, because they're afraid of, the mistakes or the failures or the risks that it might cost the company. And there's always I think in my opinion, that's inevitable. That's going to happen regardless. But how quickly can you address those risks, get in front of them, and then rebound? So I think there's just a lot of value of speed.
So I'm going to take everything you just said on that part and see if this, again, tell me if this summary fits. hire people with less experience, not because experience isn't valuable, but because pivotability is valuable. Work ethic, where they still have tons of energy in the tank to go a million miles an hour in one direction, recognize quickly that was the wrong direction, pivot to the other one without being pissed about it. Whereas those that are maybe more experienced are expecting this playbook done this way, this style, less
Exactly.
pivots. How
Exactly.
how how many major go-to-market pivots have you experienced at Athellis? And I wanted to, a major would mean the sales organization has to be restructured, new head of sales, new product being sold. In 5 years, approximate how many major go-to-market changes have you been part of?
Four, I'd say. It's almost one a year. I think we've probably kept the similar leadership for three out of those four. But besides all the other things that you talked about, those changes were 100% made, whether that was commission, quota structures, employee counts, churn, hiring, absolutely differences across the board there. So yeah, it's definitely a big number.
And what would you say is like, if you go and you take that, so you've got young, hungry, and committed reps. You've got leaders ready to pivot and kind of keep up to speed, hiring fast and hiring well. But then you've got promotions to go in and make. Walk us through as you transitioned your career from a rep mindset to a leader mindset. What are a couple lessons you would give to those reps out there that are thinking, should I go into leadership? Should I not? What sucks about being a leader? And what's great about being a leader? Just go to your first leadership turn. So just a couple years into Athellis.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's so much value in spending a lot, and I mean an exorbitant amount of time in actually understanding if you want leadership. I think there's a misconception around leadership, especially from a rep's perspective, where it can sometimes be over glamorous. And there's definitely folks that are probably like, I don't think that's glamorous at all. But the folks that are looking at, leadership down the road really think long and hard about not just the ability to move into leadership, but what does that aftermath of that transition actually look like? There's, going into some of the drawbacks, I think, is obviously you're taking a sacrifice in pay. There is definitely, more out of your control in some extenses. Like you still have full control of your team, but it's not a position where it's like, hey, if you were an IC, I'm going to go out and I've had a bad quarter, I've had a bad month. It's on me to kind of go out and flip things around. As a leader, you obviously have that same mindset, but it's not that black and white because now there's multiple heads under you. There's different personalities involved. Each rep is drastically different. There's just a lot more variables that you need to understand. So I think having a strong understanding of your ability to control the outcome, I think is really, really valuable because you need to get used to the fact that as a leader, you have the opportunity to control the outcome, but it is an adjustment and it is a learning curve moving from an IC to a leader of how much you can truly control the outcome. And I think there's things that kind of a learning curve there.
How many years before you felt like you had as much control and kind of ownership over your OTE as a leader as you did when you were a rep? So how many years as a leader before you're like, okay, I've got this to go in and earn the OTE that I want? I've now got all kind of the major factors figured out as a frontline leader before you do second line.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when I think back on it, I don't even know if it was really a moment where it's like, okay, I figured it out. I think it's such a gradual process that is slowly starting to improve and slowly starting to kind of just gain more traction on over time. But I'd say within probably a year, you feel like you've nailed down the ability to control the outcome in a much better sense. And I think that there's, even to give a little bit more context to that is it's super important to also understand and be patient for leadership too. So, my experience, I think at Athellis, one thing that was frustrating for me personally, which is not on the company at all, is I think maybe a little bit overly ambitious to kind of move up the ladder. I had a chip on my shoulder being the first salesperson at the company and wanting to, promote and kind of own the team, run the team, help scale the company, work with the executive team as quickly and aggressively as possible. And there were moments that I was absolutely expecting a promotion and it didn't land. And, it's frustrating. It can be demotivating. But those situations where, you might think you're ready, but you're not, and it doesn't land in your lap, is truly some of the best, I think, learning experiences that you have, um, especially when you're still an IC. Because I think you truly learn how to be able to like be a little bit more patient with your outcome. Spend a lot more time focusing on your paychecks too, and understand really what it takes to be able to like truly be ready for that position.
I love it. We've got just a few minutes left. One of the questions that I want to go in and dig into is the decisions that you've made over the last 3 years. A lot of people that do go take that early stage startup, they get it to a certain stage, usually anywhere from 18 to 24 months, sometimes even 36. And then they think the ceiling's there, often wrong. They think they've hit a ceiling. There's no chance they got to jump. Why have you chosen to stay? Because it's a big change from Series A 2019 to 7 billion 2024 and a lot more. Why are you choosing to stay versus taking everything you've got now, go redo it at another company?
Yeah, that is probably the most important question I think to constantly ask yourself when you are working at a startup, and it's also the most important question to ask yourself when you're about to start working at a startup too. And for me personally, I think the biggest thing that has constantly just tied me to staying at this company and seeing it out is I think the personal connection that I've built with not just the people around me, but the actual impact of what we're doing. I think that the genuine passion that I feel for the difference we're making is such a motivating piece for me. And to do it with such intellectual people where you're constantly developing yourself, whether you even realize it or not, is something that like, for me, it's like, why would I take myself out of this environment, right? When you're working with incredibly intellectual people constantly, you are in a position where you are naturally developing, skills that you're not even expecting to develop, but you're just surrounding yourself with high caliber people. And for me, that's just like, it's invaluable. And I want to continue to be able to put myself out there. And if, especially when you're seeing progress too, right? Like there's startups where you're in there for a while and you're not seeing the progress. And I know that's hard to be able to kind of push through too. So you got to treat this, journey into startup like a marathon. And the funny thing is, we're in our company, we're saying this is going to be a sprint. We're going to focus on this sprint. And then you realize that, hey, we're kind of sprinting this entire marathon, but you got to make sure that you're keeping a good pace, and that you're understanding your why and what is really the common, aspect of you feeling motivated towards the rest of the team. And if you feel like that's unified, then you're in the right boat, because I think your personal why should have some similarities with the people around you, with the executive team, and I think you'll go really far if you just connect with that on a deeper level and constantly remind yourself. But yeah, I mean, overall for me, I think it's just the amount of personal development that I've experienced and the privilege to be able to work in such a high caliber company and continue to see the success. It's the dream to see us IPO, and who knows where we go from there.
I love it, Vishnu. One of the top CEOs I ever had the chance of speaking with, her name's Jen Morgan. She commented, she said, a lot of people think the saying, grass is greener on the other side. And that it's just kind of over and over and over said. She's like, over her career, what she's learned is grass is greener wherever you choose to water it. And over your career, as I've got to get to know you, I think all the listeners that are going to be hearing you, the founders that are now going to be inspired to go build better go-to-market teams, you've chosen to water the grass wherever you're at. Build up all those around you, build up your teams, build up the company. Truly appreciate you taking the time with us. If there's anything we can do for you, let us know. And then as we get feedback from our listeners, we're going to come back and ask you. I'm sure we're going to be doing a follow-up.
Absolutely.